Welcome to Bite the Talk, a podcast hosted by the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, known as GAIN. Join us as we discuss all things food systems related: diets, nutrition, environment, health, you name it. Meet fascinating people working in the nutrition and food community. Tune in to Bite the Talk and let's explore together.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bite the Talk podcast, the space where we dig deep into the big ideas, the challenges and the opportunities shaping food systems across Africa and beyond. I'm your host, Mark Gachagua. Today we shine the spotlight on Uganda, often called the Pearl of Africa. Uganda is not only breathtakingly beautiful with its lush green landscapes, Lake Victoria, and the source of the best Matoke, but it's also an agricultural powerhouse. Nearly 70% of Ugandans are employed in agriculture, and the country is one of the region's leading producers of coffee, bananas, and fish. But Uganda's food system is more than just crops and exports. It's about nutrition, resilience, livelihoods, and the role food plays in culture and identity. Since the 2021 Food System Summit, Uganda has been working on translating commitments into real action. And today, we want to reflect on how far the country has come and what challenges remain and where the opportunities lie for transformation. Joining me is a brilliant guest, Damali Sali. Damali is a bold and visionary leader with over 18 years of executive level experience across financial services, trade, facilitation, private sector development, and innovation in Africa. She's the new country director for GAIN in Uganda, where she leads efforts to transform food systems through inclusive and sustainable solutions. Damali held a senior role at Trademark Africa and the Private Sector Foundation Uganda and worked at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation in London. She's also a published author, women's entrepreneurs ambassador, and founder of a platform spotlighting Africa's innovators and changemakers. Damali, welcome to Bite the Talk. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I really love the description of Uganda. I really liked it. You were spot on.
Thank you. You're my neighbor, so I have to be careful,
Yeah, because I'd be like, that's wrong. That's not correct.
Exactly. And speaking of Uganda, I mean, many memories come to mind because a few years ago I was in Ginger, and I don't know if it's the district commissioner or who it was. He prepared a very big, I don't want to call it a banquet, but it was a lot of nice food. And I'm just curious, what did you have for breakfast or lunch?
A very big banquet. That's a Ugandan thing to do. We eat a lot of food. We do.
Yeah. What did you have for breakfast?
Okay, this is going to be very typical of me. I had Matoke.
Wow.
Yes.
Politically correct.
And Matoke mixed with groundnuts, which is a very typical Ugandan meal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember the groundnuts. And
Have you heard it?
Oh, yeah, I did. Actually, you've just reminded me. When I was there, I did. I even had some uji, I don't know, porridge mixed with ground.
Porridge, yes.
Yeah, very rich. Very rich.
You can't miss it.
I can't. I mean, and I've always liked the way, we just mentioned groundnuts. And I was just reading somewhere that this is one of the orphan foods that we have.
Yeah.
Many people are not talking about, or maybe they're actually neglected. No one is producing them at scale, but they're really, really nutritious.
Yes.
Yeah. And
it's interesting. It's rarely eaten by itself. Like they always mix the groundnuts with something. So it's considered, it's like you have it when you don't have anything else. Can you imagine? And get it very nutritious, but culturally, for us, we have it when you don't have meat, when you don't have chicken, then you're like, oh God, I don't have anything. Let me have the groundnuts then.
we need to respect the groundnuts more.
Yeah, we don't fully understand the power it holds in nutrition.
Oh my God. If we start talking about the benefits, I think we'll end up with a very long show. But we don't want to do that, maybe in another episode. But Damali, I'm really happy to have you on this episode. And I know many will be excited to hear from you. And we are really happy. And congratulations on joining GAIN as the new country director.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for Uganda, we are really, really excited to hear from you, to learn from you. And before we do that, maybe you can tell us, how did you end up in this place? I mean, we have a clue on what you've been able to do, but please tell us about yourself, what excites you about the work that you're doing in Uganda.
So, I was born and raised in Uganda. I am, if you talk to people who know me, they'll consider me a very patriotic Ugandan. And I often describe myself as an Afro-optimist. I always see opportunity, potential, of our continent, our country in some ways. So, and then in terms of academics, I'm a chartered accountant. I practiced accounting. My career, I did it in London. I was there for about 12 years. And then in 2012, I relocated back to Uganda. But I was born and educated in Uganda my first years. I only moved to the UK to study accounting, and then I practiced. Then in 2012, I relocated back to Uganda, and then I moved into trade facilitation, where I work with Trademark East Africa. Then I moved to the Private Sector Foundation. And here I am now in nutrition. But I do have a personal, it's interesting how things are usually, lined up. So in 2016, when my dad was, he's now 93, he had a stroke about, in 2016. And it paralyzed him. To this day, he can only move in a wheelchair. And the only thing we could control, of course, high blood pressure, cholesterol, everything, all his health indicators were bad. And we couldn't say now go and exercise. The only thing we could control is literally his diet. And that's how we as a family started looking at food, saying, what is he eating? Is what he's eating helpful? Or is it going to damage his health even further? Because he already had a stroke. So that's when I realized just how powerful nutrition is, because that was the only thing left that we could do. And we've been controlling his diet, what he eats, and ensuring that whatever he eats makes him healthier, doesn't make him worse off. And that journey, we've had to do it just Googling, searching, and just, we've been stumbling through it, because nutrition is not a thing that we are very much aware of in the country. And it usually astounds me just how important nutrition is, and yet how far off the radar it is from someone's mind, day-to-day mind. Because until my father had a stroke, I had never thought about nutrition in any particular way at all. So that's how, like I said, when the stars align, then this role comes up, and it's nutrition. And by then I had a strong appreciation of nutrition, not from an academic sense, because I still don't think I know enough about nutrition, but from a personal, I saw what the food had helped my father when we changed what he eats. So, and then, gain his own nutrition. So I was like, this works for me. I have a personal story here, and I think more people really need to know how much more food could actually make you, healthier, more alive, less sick. It could allow you to have a dignified, life. He could have, if we didn't feed him properly, he could have been vegetative, but I can still have a conversation with him, even though he can't walk on his own. I can go and joke with him and laugh, and because what he's eating is keeping him healthier. And my friends normally, laugh at me like, your dad is 93 years old. Look at you, and you're still, And for me, he's not 93 years old. He's just my dad.
Amazing. Shout out to your dad.
Thank you. I'm telling you, made it to the podcast.
Yeah, we made it, and we talked about groundnuts. The big shout out to him. You've just reminded me why we do what we do. And I think that's really important, because our vision can be blurred by the commercial interest or any other personal interest. But, you just reminded me that one of the reasons why I joined Gain and that I like working at Gain is I love children. And every other weekend, I spend time with children between the ages of about 6 to 12 years old. So I like hanging with them, learning from them, and just mentoring some of them, and also just teaching some of them. And when you look at the figures, for example, stunting and wasting, and when I look at those kids, I'm like, I wouldn't want any of them to be stunted or wasted, for that matter. And that, kind of fuels your efforts. When you're working on any particular piece of work, you're motivated that generation that we are working with. And I'm happy that you're also helping your dad. You have MicroMasters in nutrition. And I just want to connect this to Uganda, because I also feel like the culture we operate in really influences the kind of food that we take. How would you describe Uganda's relationship with food? Or what role does food play in everyday life or even in the culture of Ugandans?
Well, Uganda is often, and you also have said it, we are celebrated as the food basket. And rightly so. We do have food. We have fertile soils. We have amazing weather. We are farmers, I'm sure. Most Ugandans you talk to, they'll be like, I'm a farmer. We literally can actually feed millions. And yet, hunger, malnutrition remain serious challenges here in Uganda. We are suffering from undernutrition, overnutrition, and micronutrition deficiencies. Let me give you some stats just to, surprisingly open your eyes here. 26% of children under 5 in Uganda are stunted. 26%. 3% of them are wasted. And only 10% of those kids actually meet what they call a minimum acceptable diet, Another sobering stat is that iron deficiency anemia affects 50% of young children and 30% of women of reproductive age in Uganda. Paradoxically, Uganda, on the one hand, we have abundant food, and yet we are malnourished. Guess what? The main reason for this is mainly culture, because our culture is the food. Our culture literally dictates the food we eat. So I was telling you, I love Matoke. Again, I don't know if I love Matoke. I was raised eating Matoke because I am in Uganda. Our staple is Matoke, and we eat Matoke from birth to death every single day, morning, lunch, dinner, and we'll figure out how to make Matoke breakfast, Matoke lunch, and Matoke dinner every single day. Now that's just one region. There are 8, 9, 10 other regions, and each region has its own. That's how diverse we are. Each one region has its own staple food, and it eats that staple food alone for the entirety of its life. So while I may have what we call kalo, so there is millet, there's a region that eats millet, there's a region that their staple food is milk, all of that, I won't be eating all of that. I'll just stick to the Matoke because culturally, that's what, we eat. And we also don't know. Like my dad, I'm sure he didn't know that if he could buy Matoke and sweet potatoes for his kids, they'll be much more healthier. Put in some milk, if they can do that every day, have that mixed, maybe they'll be healthier. If he knew that, he would, because he wants his kids to be, better. But our culture literally dictates how we eat. And because we are also not informed or aware of the other aspects, then that affects us. Like I've told you with my father's story, it's because something happened and we were forced to actually inform ourselves. And this information we had to get ourselves. We weren't told this in the hospital. But we were trying to just keep him alive. Our mother had just died 3 years prior. She also had a stroke and she only survived 1 month and she passed away. So when he had a stroke, we're like, you're not going. You're going nowhere. We're going to do everything. So we had to teach ourselves on figuring out what is he supposed to eat. And even then, we still have to feed him the Matoke because as far as he's concerned, unless he eats Matoke, he has not eaten. Like, it's that bad that in our tribe, food is Matoke. If you say food, you mean Matoke. The other foods are other foods. They're other words. They're not food. So that's how much that in the midst of plenty, we actually are malnourished, given the stats that I've just given you. So for us, at least in the country, the issue is not so much food scarcity, even though there are instances of that. It's more scarcity of information, is information scarcity actually. So, and we need to invest, as much as we invest in production, we have to invest in communication. We have to invest in awareness so that people know. Because like, if I give again the example, my dad, he had kids, we are relatively okay. We can afford to actually feed him a balanced diet. We didn't know, so we didn't. He also was relatively well off. I mean, he was working until he had that stroke. And yeah, he loves to work. But he could have fed himself healthier if he knew, but he didn't know. So guess what? He ate Matoke from the day he was born to the day he had the stroke. And therefore, he may not have had a balance. And I usually tell people that luckily for us, for Uganda, the bigger challenge of food not being available isn't there. So half the journey, we are half the journey. Yeah. The other half is actually we being more aware. What are we supposed to eat? How are we supposed to eat it? How are we supposed to prepare it? And in what proportions are we supposed to eat it in? And that's where the knowledge, the communication, the awareness happens. And it's not just for the poor, it's even for the elite, it's for everybody actually.
Yeah, a lot of knowledge is power. I appreciate that point. And I'm just curious, Damali, you're right, nutrition and having a healthy diet can really, really transform the way someone is. I'm curious about the Gen Zs. I'm sure you've heard this term, the Gen Z. They are younger generation. They're the majority. When you look at our population pyramid, especially for sub-Saharan nations, you find that the population pyramid really shows that we have a very, very large population of young people. I'm talking about people between 10 to 24 years. So they're about, how are they, with diets in Uganda? Are they still, all of them eating Matoke, or are they coming up with new ideas? What do you think?
So they're clusters of these. So actually, Uganda, our demographics are crazy. I think we just did a census and almost 70% of Uganda's population is actually below the age of 35, right? We are a very young population. And it depends, on the classes. So the majority, I would say, are still eating culturally because you're fed what your parents give you. But of course, we have a smaller minority where you're not so much affected by culture because your parents are a certain well-offness, yeah? And those will be now the ones who are obese because their parents can afford the over-processed foods. So they, therefore, I keep telling people, interestingly, in Uganda, KFC is for the rich people. And yet, in the Western world, I ate KFC when I was a poor student. And you would never see me, walking into a KFC in Uganda. But I have to, my nieces demand that they want KFC if you want to give them a treat. So we have that minority that is well off, but is feeding its kids very bad food because their parents can afford, they have a higher disposable income. They're eating ultra-processed foods. And therefore, those are the ones who are now, overweight and obese. Then the majority who may not be well off, which is what, the larger part of the population is, they are still eating traditionally. But then also we recently did a study in Uganda where we were looking at the food safety. So we do have if you've been to Uganda, you know that our streets in Kampala, as soon as it hits 6 p.m., the streets are going to be full of, Matoke, chicken, everything fried on the streets. You can literally feed yourself on the streets before you get home. And they're usually targeting people who are coming from work so that you buy the chicken, it's already roasted, you eat it. But the oil that they're using to actually make that chicken is highly carcinogenic. And who are they feeding that stuff for? The people. The people they're feeding are the working population of Uganda, who has just left work in the afternoon and they're going home. Guess what? Those are the same people who are going to fall sick and then they're going to have these non-communicable diseases in less than 10 years. And that's the productive workforce. So there are different layers to it. But that's unproductive workforce because now they don't have time because they're working. That's when they'll eat the street food. But usually now when they go home, say on the weekend, they're likely to be eating, again, their cultural foods. Our culture is so intense that you don't know. I will tell you, I ate Matoke this morning. I'm not ignorant of nutrition, but I ate Matoke. That's just the way it is. It's so strong. So it differs on the different classes of people who will be affected. I usually we also have, we did some workforce nutrition studies or we engage some private sector companies. So these are companies that employ maybe 2,000 casual workers. They're manufacturers. They employ maybe 2,000 casual workers. And these 2,000 casual workers are spending most of the time at the workplace. The companies is feeding them because they have, they give them lunch so that they're more productive. So we did some studies on what exactly are you feeding them anyway. They're feeding them something we call posho, which I don't know if it's unique to Uganda. We call it posho, but it's maize flour. They're feeding them maize flour. They give them the porridge from maize flour. They give them the posho for lunch and then, an evening, probably that. So we're like, okay, so if you're giving them that, like Monday to Monday, because they're at work, do you think they're getting the right nutrients? And the companies, of course, they're profit-making companies, so they don't really care. They're like, as long as they do their work. But they're not as productive than if you feed them a balance. So now when we pitched that story to say that if you feed them a nice balanced diet, they will be more productive. They won't fall sick as often. Your machines will be able to run always. Also, those females, and more than 50% of their workers are actually young females. And the reason why they're young females is because females are more risk averse. They won't steal your things as often. Sorry, men. But so they prefer to hire young females. But those young females are of reproductive age, so they'll go away and give birth. So now the case we made to these companies was that if you have 50% of your young females and they're going to give birth at some point, if they're healthier, it means when they give birth to that child won't fall sick often. It means they won't go off work often. And for the companies, that made sense. They're like, oh, okay. Talk to me more about this, this menu. And all we did was give them, capacity to say this menu is not diversified. If you mix in this, if you give them maybe sweet potatoes on Tuesday, and then you give them cassava on Thursday, which is already available, surprisingly, and is incredibly cheap, you will be giving them a balanced diet. It won't cost you more. Yeah. It will just mean you just need another supplier. It's just a small inconvenience, but then there will be more production. So in a way, there are different clusters, but almost you can see the same string of we have the food, but it's not diversified. And not diversified because we don't know. We are not aware. Even when it's there, even when we can do something about it. If we don't know, then we can't do much about it.
I agree with you. If you don't know, you can't do much about it. And I like the fact that you've mentioned that study on street food. I don't know if it's the same one I heard about. I think Makerere University were helping or...
Yes, that's the one.
Is that the one?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I think I had it, was it earlier this year or some time around that time? And for me, it's amazing to know that we have all these foods and the potential to even have more. And the knowledge is really lacking in terms of knowing what to put together and what can actually benefit us as human beings. But now, Damali, let's shift the gears a bit. You know about the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit. And Uganda actually made a series of commitments, to build stronger, more resilient and more inclusive food systems. Looking back, what are some of the key reflections on Uganda food systems landscape since then? What has changed? What progress have you seen? And where do you feel like there's some hurdles that, we need to overcome, or rather Uganda needs to overcome?
I think as a country, I'm of two minds. As a country, I feel like there's been big shifts in this area, in that there has been an elevation or a recognition that food systems are a national development priority. And that's important. That's very important. It's been accepted by the government, by the public sector, by the technocrats, that food systems is a national development priority. So we've seen stronger political and public awareness about food, about nutrition, about climate resilience, and how it is interconnected. And I've also seen deliberate effort to bring different actors, say the government, the private sector, civil society, development partners are all, around the same table in an integrated way. So for example, our Uganda's National Nutrition Action Plan, which is held in the Office of the Prime Minister plays a central role. And I thought it was really good that the government decided that the Office of the Prime Minister will hold this Uganda Nutrition Action Plan, because nutrition cuts across several sectors. Nutrition is not only in health, it's not only in agriculture, it's not only in education, it's in environment, it's not only in trade. Can you see how it is cross-cutting? It is everywhere. By the government deciding that the Office of the Prime Minister will host this Nutrition Action Plan, it will be in charge of the high-level coordination for it, and it will convene all the key platforms to align the ministries and make sure that nutrition is mainstreamed. I thought that was incredible. That decision, in terms of how you structured nutrition, that decision was really good. And the Office of the Prime Minister is also responsible for tracking progress, for ensuring accountability and coordination happens. So it has been able to link it also with Uganda's National Development Plan, with Uganda's Vision 2040 at the highest level, because the Office of the Prime Minister reports to, the presidency, it reports to the cabinet. So it has elevated, I would say that nutrition has been elevated in that way. And I feel like the real differentiator for Uganda has been the ability to position nutrition as a national development issue. It's not just a health issue. It's not just an agriculture issue. It's a national development issue. And that's how it's now been mainstreamed, and it has strong political visibility, which is absolutely crucial. However, having said that, there are still significant hurdles. We have policies, very good policies, and yet implementation at scale is still, I would say, slow, because often due to resource constraints. And say, for example, the impacts of climate change and economic shocks continue to threaten some of the gains that have already been made. And while we talk a lot about inclusivity, many smallholder farmers, rural communities, even households still face barriers in accessing, markets. After I grow my beans and I've eaten some, how do I sell the rest? They also struggle in accessing nutritious food. And sometimes it's usually about awareness, and they don't know what is nutrition, what isn't. And then they also face, challenges in financing. So in short, Uganda has, we've come a long way in laying the groundwork, in positioning nutrition, in making sure we have the right framework for it, in giving it the highest level of commitment and visibility. But the real test actually is now being on the implementing and ensuring that the commitments we made are not felt in terms of we've written a paper, we've made commitments. I want them felt at household level. I want that poor, vulnerable mother to know that her child can eat ground nuts and be better. See? That's what I want. Yeah. I want that poor mother to be like, let me grow some groundnuts, some beans, some matoke, and some cassava on my little plot, because it will help me feel better. That's when now I would say that we've moved. Even though we've done some, good foundation, we are not there yet.
I think that would be a very nice indicator. I mean, even at the grassroots level, having someone, saying, I've just realized that, if I eat this and this, it will be much, much better. There's I think in Kenya, there's a project called Vegetables for All. And this is simply encouraging people to consume more vegetables, and also for the farmers to produce vegetables. Now, thinking about Uganda and how fertile it is, it should be very easy to have these green leafy vegetables. I don't want to name them in my mouth, but they're really, really delicious. And they grow quite fast, and they're very, very nutritious. So
let me tell you a story about Uganda. So,
yes.
Again, differences. So we did a study in Uganda as well. We also have the Vegetables for All project, by the way. But it was informed by a study where we found that Ugandans, despite our fertile soils, despite the vegetables being there actually, we only ate on average 28 grams of vegetables per day, vis-a-vis the recommended 400 grams per day. And the reason for this, again, somewhat is cultural. I can give you, for me, my perspective from the center, from Uganda, is that you have your food, your plate of Matoke, of course. Matoke, occupies 70% of the plate. You have a little bit of, maybe, of your sauce. And then you have a dash of a vegetable on the side.
A dash?
They start eating. A dash is a dash. And it's a hint of a vegetable. And then you eat your plate. You start with the Matoke and the sauce. And if you're still hungry, you eat the vegetable. So if you asked me before I knew this, if you asked me if I ate vegetables, I would say I eat vegetables, by the way, because it comes with the food. Yeah. It's just a dash. I wouldn't know that I am supposed to eat 400 grams of it. But again, this is contextual, regional. That's in the central. In the north, however, we have cultures there where vegetables are a staple. They put them in every sauce they do. Okay. So those ones are less deficient than, say, people from the central, people from the west, and people from the east. And you're right, vegetables, they're readily available. In fact, they're very cheap vegetables. If you bought vegetables, you'll be able to feed yourself. But vegetables are also seen, because remember, as I told you, if you don't have sauce, then you have groundnuts. Vegetables are, if you don't have money, then you eat vegetables.
Oh my.
So they are seen as a poor people food. Can you imagine that? Culturally, it's seen as a poor people food. If you're a man and you don't have, enough money, yes, you're going to buy your family vegetables and you're being seen as a poor man. If you have money, you buy your family meat.
Yes, and KFC.
and KFC if you're richer. So that's how culture then distorts this thing. And in this particular Vegetables for All project, which yes is being implemented in Kenya and also in Uganda on a smaller scale though, is that our biggest part of it is actually on communicating. Awareness is telling people why they should eat vegetables. Because that's the most important part. If I don't know, you don't know what you don't know. If I don't know I'm supposed to feed my child more vegetables because it will keep them healthy, they will not fall sick, I won't feed them. So our biggest part of it has been on the awareness. Because when you look at the vast majority, even those who can afford the vegetables are actually still not feeding their kids vegetables. Then there are poor people who may not be able to afford certain vegetables, they can grow them. We have a lot of farmers who actually grow vegetables. Also, we found the farmers grow vegetables, but they don't know the nutritional value of the vegetables. So they sell the vegetables. Yeah. And when they get the money, they buy unhealthy things. So it's a paradox. But I always, again, being of my usual optimistic self, I'm like, but we have them. So that's half the journey. So let's make sure that people are more aware. So and the whole idea of Vegetables for All, we also are ensuring that we involve the entire family. We want the mother to eat the vegetables. We want the mother to go with her kids to buy the vegetables and cook the vegetables. We want the father to know why the vegetables are important. For those fathers who buy the food, who want to go back home as the big man, I brought meat today, we want to teach them that actually be a big man every day and take vegetables every day. So we're trying to ensure that it's also communal, because food is cultural. Until you embed it into people's psyches, it won't change. Same way I ate Matoke this morning, even though I know all the facts.
That's very interesting. And I agree with you. The way I know Uganda, I know it from because in my earlier life, I was working in the reproductive health sector. And, I'm happy that you mentioned the stats about the population, 70% being under 35. And that tells you that women of reproductive age, most of them are actually teenagers, some of them, and very young adults, below 24 years old. And you'll find that, their fertility rates are up, they're giving birth to healthy children most of the time. Maybe sometimes they don't, but they still lack that nutritional foundation, especially when they're lactating and they want to bring up their kids. You can see that cycle kind of repeat itself, because if the mother is not really aware that this is what she needs to feed on, especially now that, she has extra responsibilities, and then at the same time she's bringing up this child, God bless them, you find that, that cycle can be repeated, because, once this kid is weaned, there you go, the Matoke is waiting for you. But I think we have a very beautiful opportunity to really create some awareness around this. And you're right, it's not like the food is lacking. It's just a matter of knowing that this is what I need to prioritize, or this is what I need to include. And that's something I'm willing to help you with, Damali, because I know you have very big plans for Uganda. So So
before you go into that, I wanted to talk about that mother. And we do have, they usually say Uganda has a high fertility rate, but the stats I gave you at the very beginning, where I said, was it 26% of, almost 30% of mothers of women of reproductive age are anemic, which then affects, because the conception starts before the actual conception. It starts with the quality of the egg. Yeah. So it means then from conception, that child is back a little nutritionally, they are on a back burner. But then even what she eats when she's pregnant also matters, but then she's still eating that constant matoke all the time. And then after she gives birth, so we're having this conversation, especially around during breastfeeding week, we were like, it affects different women in different ways. For example, a lot of the poor mothers breastfeed because they don't have a choice. They can only breastfeed. That's all they have. They can only give and those kids are breastfed exclusively because they don't have that much food available. So those mothers are breastfeeding, the poor mothers are breastfeeding, not because they are aware, because that's all they have access to. Then you find this corporate mother who works for a company which gives her 3 months of maternity leave, who, as soon as she got pregnant, because she was online, somehow Instagram was able to show her, to realize, wait, she's pregnant, and then start giving her adverts of formula. As soon as she gives birth, even though she has 3 months of maternity leave, she'll give her child formula. Not because she thinks formula is better, because formula has been in her feed. And people talking about breastfeeding have not been in her feed. So she actually doesn't know. And you don't know what you don't know. So she doesn't Google it to find out, is formula better than breast milk? Because you don't know there's actually a comparator. And guess what? Formula will tell you we have calcium, we have iron. Sometimes actually they think formula is better than breast milk because that's all that they've been saying digital. This digital bombardment is higher than the breast milk bombardment, for example. So she starts, even though she has 3 months of maternity leave, she starts giving her child formula. Child is allergic, they're sick, but she did all that because she didn't actually know, because no one is telling her these things either. But the formula guys are in her feet. They're telling her formula is better, formula is better. So she actually thinks it's actually better. So that's a corporate mother. Then, however, of course, we should exclusively breastfeed for the first 6 months. But you're a corporate mother, you only have 3 months off, so you go back to work. Even if you are breastfeeding, maybe you are those ones who knew. It's harder for you to breastfeed when you get back to work because there may not even be a room where you can express. Even your employer may not be that flexible. So even government has to work on those policies. But those are the fortunate mothers, actually. Then you have these casual workers. You remember those mothers I've told you who are working in factories? That one doesn't have the luxury. You give birth, they don't get maternity leave. Those companies are not giving you maternity. You are coming back to work. So, and are you able to express when you're at work? Probably not. So you're going to, whatever you earn, you're going to actually give your child formula. Sometimes you also don't know that it's best to actually give a breastfeed. But still, that's still the lucky mother. There are some mothers who are even more disadvantaged. Can you imagine that? These mothers are the mothers who work in the informal sector, especially in markets. So imagine this woman who works in a market. She wakes up at 3 a.m. to go to the market, and usually they're the vegetable vendors. Wake up 3 a.m. to go to the market because that's when the vegetables are delivered. That's when you buy the best, the freshest vegetables. So you have to get to the market by at 4 a.m. So, and imagine you had a baby recently. These mothers don't have maternity leave. They don't have a disposable income. You basically earn today what you're going to eat today. So they'll probably give birth today, and in 2 days they're back to work because they have to eat. So she comes back to work, but her work, it doesn't start at 9 a.m. It starts at 3 a.m. And she also has nowhere to keep the baby, so she goes with the baby to the market. Now that mother is even more disadvantaged because she's going with that baby 2 days old and she's in the market all day. Now you may say, okay, she's not rich enough. She's probably going to feed the child. That child, however, is sometimes not fed because she's so busy. When she gets to the market, she puts the baby over there. She has to buy those vegetables, the best vegetables. So even if the child may be crying, I'm sorry, I have to get those vegetables. If the customers come, I'm not breastfeeding you. I'm giving the customer because I need the money. So there are so many different nuances and different interventions that are required for each. But in the string of all these, again, knowledge and awareness is important. For the market woman, definitely there should be some infrastructure that helps her. For the corporate woman, she mostly just requires knowledge and information. For the casual worker, you need to work also with their employer to ensure that the employer knows that if she breastfeeds, if you give her a facility where she can breastfeed, the child won't fall sick often, the child won't have allergies. It's good for your bottom line. Now for the employer, you have to talk about the bottom line. So you have to make a business case for it. And those are the different bits of nuances that we have to provide. But if you think about breast milk, which is free and actually most times available, except in a few mothers who actually can't breastfeed, but it's a smaller percentage, we are still not breastfeeding because we don't know. And also that communication bit, we are not communicating about breast milk as much as the formula guys are communicating about formula. Yeah. So you have to compete. You really have to meet them where they are. So at some point, we also need to be, I was talking to somebody who was like, but you nutrition people, you never told us about these things. The formula guys are everywhere. They're on my Twitter, they're on my X, they're on Instagram, they find me everywhere. You guys, I have to come to a conference. I have to have a friend who works in nutrition. How many people have access? So we kind of have to tackle the problem from where it is and meet it where it is. Where's the competition? Where's the bravo?
Yeah.
The bravo is on awareness, is on communication.
That's really amazing. And you've just reminded me a question. I asked some of I was moderating a discussion. It was a big government conference called the Devolution Conference, this year's Devolution Conference in Kenya. And I had a few governors, senior people in government. And I had the liberty of asking them, so how long did you breastfeed? How long? Some told me, for me it was just 1 year. Another one told me 5 years. And I thought, I thought I was doing well. I only breastfed for 2 years, Damali. Special thanks to my mom. That's the love.
She needs an award. She needs an award. Absolutely. Because I was like, when I knew this much about breastfeeding, I wanted to be like, Mom, I need to give you your props.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was such a random question, but it tells you that, and I know for some ladies they might say it's not cool. I just want to go back to my life. So 3 months is okay. But I like what you're talking about, and for example, exclusive breastfeeding. So knowledge is really a key ingredient to know how to apply the resources that you have, because right now we are not even talking about the lack of resources, just knowing how to apply. So I really, really appreciate that perspective. Damali, we are going to switch gears a bit and now talk about food systems from an African perspective. Have Uganda being part of the larger continental picture. Earlier this year, we had the Kampala Declaration with the African Union, and that's based on the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. And this program, or rather the Kampala Declaration, is calling for, for accelerated food systems, agri-food, they're calling it, agri-food systems transformation. From your perspective, Damali, how do these frameworks matter for Uganda, and how do you see Uganda aligning its national actions with these continental commitments? Because Uganda has actually committed to this.
I think these frameworks like, CADAP, the Kampala Declaration, and even the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, they're able to give us or the country the vision and a clear framework of accountability and implementation and guidance. And that's important. You need to have that very clear framework. So they are really, really important in ensuring that you are under a certain framework and there are certain deliverables that you get to. So they're important. And for Uganda then at national level, it's about domesticating those frameworks, ensuring that you align these frameworks within your national actions. And then you're able to position, in a way that how does it benefit the country? How does it benefit the country in terms of regional trade, in terms of investment, in terms of shared growth? Say, for example, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area provides an economic platform to expand agricultural markets, to strengthen value chains, to scale innovation. So from a framework and guidance perspective, they are important. But also, more important, you have to come at country level and domesticate it and see, how am I going to do that? Uganda, at the moment, what the government has done is in domesticating these three, specifically CADAP, the Kampala Declaration, and the ACFTA, the trade agreement, because those are the three major agreements that are driving the government at the moment. So the way they've domesticated them is to focus them on three major groups. And the government of Uganda, everything it's doing is on three major sectors. It's on agro, they don't like to call it agriculture anymore, because it's agro-industrialization, tourism, development, and then science, technology, and innovation. And they've identified those four areas as a way to domesticate all those continental frameworks. And they see that as connecting a direct bridge between the continental commitments and tangible transformation on the ground, especially in ensuring they have a healthy population, they have a productive population, there is economic growth, there are jobs, there is economic development. That's how they've domesticated them. So, and I think it's a good way, but, and I usually always put a caveat, framework-wise, thinking-wise, that's great and it's aligned. The next big thing, in fact, the most important thing and usually the hardest thing, is on implementation, getting those done. But of course, starting with the right frameworks, of course, helps. It's 50% of the journey, then the implementation.
Yeah, implementation is always I don't know how to call it, because I don't know if it's an Africa-wide, I don't want to call it an Africa. I think I want to be very...
It's a human thing.
It's a human thing. Thank you, Damali. a human thing. Thank you, Damali. That's really amazing. I think we can go on and on and on and on. Maybe we need to think about this because the time that we have is not enough. But thank you so much for your wonderful insights, Damali. It's been a huge pleasure talking to you, listening to you. Personally, I've learned a lot. I want to say special thank you to you, Damali, for joining us today, sharing your insights and even your personal story. It is really inspiring. And thank you for being so real and so fun on this wonderful episode. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Bite the Talk podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, and join us next time as we continue exploring the future of food systems across the globe. Until then, I am Gachagua, and this was Bite the Talk. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep biting the talk.
Thanks for listening. Stay safe and eat healthy.